Hello, Dad. How are you? Hey, Dad, I just had a fantastic idea. How about if I come on out and spend a week with you on vacation in California? The kids are going to be in summer camp. You and I are both retired. Why don't we get together? Graham, that's a great idea. But I have an even better one. Why don't you and I take a 2-week vacation together and let me show you the American West? We never had time or money when you were growing up. Wonderful idea, Dad. Where did you want to go? I was thinking of going to Yellowstone Park. There's a lot to see there, and there's a lot to see coming and going. So it was agreed. We went to Yellowstone Park. That's 1,200 miles, and we're in a big circle, almost 4,000 kilometers altogether. The first day we drove across California, up over the Sierra Nevada mountains, and down into Nevada. As we were driving through eastern Nevada after sunset, we saw a spectacular lightning show above us. Dry lightning, hardly any rain at all, and just lighting up the skies. And we stayed in a motel. We had listened all that day to a book on tape on year 2K. Guys need time to talk to each other, and talking about neutral things was a good way to start. By the way, neither my father nor I believed in year 2K. We don't believe in a lot of these scares, such as global warming. That's neither here nor there. The next day, we went the rest of the way to Yellowstone, where my father was in his element. He knew all about the geological history. He knew about the caldera underneath Yellowstone and why the Rainbow Lake was rainbow-colored and how the geysers erupted and all that stuff. And he knew all the wildlife, from the bears to the elk that's los to you, to the birds and to the little water lilies that grew up at 2,500 meters that are unique. Water lilies, Cucina. And he loved having an audience to tell all he knew, and I loved being that audience. After we left Yellowstone, we drove west and north, up through Montana and Idaho, and up toward Canada. And along the way, he loosened up a bit, telling me about the disappointments of his life. He was disappointed in his work, and this is how it had come about. Starts with him and my mother in high school. She was 14, he was 16 when they met. And they were boyfriend and girlfriend throughout high school, and then he graduated and went to work. There weren't many jobs. 1932 was the height of the Depression. Her father didn't approve of him and sent her off to Arkansas when she graduated to be away from my father. But somehow they persevered. They kept in touch. And in 1939, after they'd known each other for 10 years, her father said, okay, and they got married. My father had worked at this and that, and the war came. And he went to work in the shipyards, building kitchens and bathrooms. On a ship, they call those galleys and heads, on Liberty ships. Liberty ships is a separate matter. They built 2,700 Liberty ships, 135 meters long, to carry supplies to the American fighting people all over the world, and also to our allies. A great deal went to the Soviet Union through Murmansk and Archangel, through the through the waters they could accommodate. My father was very good at it, And when the Army came to say, "We want you," the shipyards always said, "No, no, no, he's too valuable for the war here." And besides that, he had too many kids. He had 2 kids and 1 on the way when the war ended. So my father went through the war without being a soldier. After the war, he had some money and he wanted to start his own sheet metal business. He was very good at it. To hear him tell it, and he was a modest man, he wouldn't lie. But my mother said, "No, no, I want to be married to a college graduate." My father said, "Yes, dear." Worked nights for a Shell oil company, went to college during the day while there were 3 kids at home. I don't know how he did it, but he graduated in 1948, 34 years old. In entomology, the study of insects. Well, not a good way to start a career at 34 when you don't have a degree in chemistry. And he spent another 30 years with a company that didn't really appreciate him. Shell Oil got the benefit of his genius when he should have been building something for himself. That was one regret. Well, we kept on driving. We went up through Washington State, up to through the beautiful Okanagan Valley, up into Canada, and then along the Fraser River Valley west to Vancouver, where we saw, it's fantastically beautiful city. I'd been there before with my sister. And we stayed with old friends from the old neighborhood and got reacquainted. And then we drove south. And along the way, I asked my father, "Daddy, why don't you get married again? There are some nice widows, such as Ruth next door, and others who would probably like to marry you." He said, "I couldn't get married again. I don't think I'm a good lover." I was shocked. I said, "Daddy, you're 85. Who cares if you're a good lover? Nobody is. And secondly, who told you you're not a good lover? You've had precisely one lover in your life, that was Mother, and she's had precisely one, which was you. How would you know?" He said, "Well, she read something in a woman's magazine about how it's supposed to be." I said, "Oh my God, those women's magazines will be the death of us all." "Daddy, they say that sex is 80% of a bad marriage, but only about 2% of a good marriage. You've got so much else. You build a life together. You raise kids, and you've been successful in all that. 3 successful kids, 3 grandchildren, and 56 happy years together. What could you want?" Well, I think my father was relieved to hear that. I don't think he'd talked to anybody about it before. So we went on. We saw Reed College, where I had been to the university 30 years before, full of liberals. And then we went south to Sisters, Oregon, out in the middle of nowhere to visit my Army friend Braxton Holly, whom I had not seen since 1968. And Braxton greeted us, happy to have some neighbors, happy to have some friends, because he doesn't get company very often where he is. And he invited us in. Well, we'd been expecting to spend the afternoon, but we could see he had a fire going and some meat on the fire. "We're going to stay for dinner, that's fine." "What would you like a drink before dinner?" Well, I have to say this about my father. He liked his drink. In fact, an unkind word would be alcoholic. He drank as much as an alcoholic, but he could handle it. Braxton is just an alcoholic. And after one drink, the meat somehow still wasn't ready. "Would you like another drink?" I like a drink myself every now and again. More drinks were had. And the meat still wasn't ready. And Braxton and my dad got to telling war stories. My dad told about chasing lizards all across Southern California when he was a boy. And Braxton told about getting a Volkswagen van and driving to Afghanistan with the intent of smuggling hashish into Europe, but getting stopped by somebody who stole his van. But it was probably a good thing, because he would have spent his life in an Afghan prison if they had caught him, so it all worked out. Anyhow, the stories flowed. And after a few more drinks, Braxton asked my father, "Els, do you like horses?" My dad, of course, remembered the horses from when he was young and said, "I love them." Braxton said, "Follow me," and took him outside into the yard. And there was a stall with a horse, a palomino about this tall, it looked like to me. Oh my God. And before I could think about how they were going to work this, Braxton picked my father, 65 kilograms, up and put him on the horse. And my father was happy as a lord. He was smiling from ear to ear, and I thought, oh my God, well, if he falls off and dies, he'll die a happy man. But the horse was very gentle. Braxton knew what he was doing and led him around quite comfortably, and my father got down, all smiles. We went and had dinner and a few more drinks. And after that, I finally dragged my father out of there. We were all drunk as lords, got him in the car, and we drove south. Now, if anybody had been there with any sense, they would have taken my car keys and thrown them in the weeds. But nobody was there with any sense. And if there's one thing I got from my father, I'm a very good drunk driver. Neither of us ever had any problems driving drunk, and we did it more times than we could confess. I had to drive 100 kilometers before we found a motel where we spent the night. We got up in the morning, we drove down to California. We drove out to the ocean where we saw some more elk and some seals, and we drove through the huge redwoods, my father griping all the time because his back hurt. We finally got home. Well, that's the end of the story. I'm glad we took that trip when we did, because my father's health went downhill for 3 years and he died. We couldn't have done it again. I'm glad we did it as we did, because without my mother, he could finally be free to say what was on his mind without somebody saying, "You know, dear, it was like this," or "You shouldn't really talk about that." It was good that there was some alcohol involved, because in vino veritas. It was a wonderful trip. I'll remember that for the rest of my life. Madam Toastmaster.